Centre stand at Offshore Europe. This afternoon, we're going to do a leadership Q&A with a number of industry leaders around how we create the next generation of technology entrepreneurs. Okay, our panellists today, starting on the left here, Mike Fleming, who's the co-vice chair of the Oil and Gas Technology Centre. And Mike's been involved in technology development for almost 35 years, involved in finance raising, commercialisation and technologies across completions, surveys, gas to liquids, fibre optics, and now well surveillance. Mostly there have been successes, but some failures too, I think. All right. Our next panellist is Neil Sims, who's the Vice President Europe CIS for Expro Group. Now, Neil joined Expro, I think, back in 1986, a variety of operational roles, and has been leading the business in Europe and CIS for the past few years. He's also a board member of the Oil and Gas Technology Centre and chairs the Task Force for Supply Chain and Exports in the MER UK Forum. And last but not least, our Chief Executive, Colette Cohen. Colette was previously Senior Vice President for Centrica Energy's offshore upstream production business in the UK and Netherlands, and has joined the OGTC over the past 9 months to set up the business and get things going. So I think we'll start today just by asking Colette to give a very quick overview of the OGTC, its plans, its priorities, and then we'll get into the discussion by asking each of the panellists to give their views on the topic. Colette.
Okay, so the Oil and Gas Technology Centre is really for industry, led by industry, and funded with 180 million of government, UK and Scottish government funding, which are match funding with industry. Our aim over sort of 10 years is to really address key challenges, particularly what we would call the fix today and the maximise economic recovery for the UK. Technologies around asset integrity, well construction, decommissioning, introducing the digitalisation of the industry, which is, I think, a topic for today to a great extent, and small pools, unlocking that future potential. We have a number of different ways that we address this. The solution centres, which you can hear about all around the stand today and through the week. We also have an innovation hub, which I think is part of getting that next generation of skills, introducing the next generation to the oil and gas industry, but also trying to bring some of those newer entrepreneurs and technologies into our and try and match them with the sort of technical challenges we have. But it's really hard if you've never been in an offshore platform to understand the challenge we have on an offshore platform. And we want to create an environment where you can come in and on land kind of see our challenge, work your way through it and see how your technology may be able to impact it. And we're also, of course, going to launch the first accelerator program for oil and gas in December of this year, which is a little different from the normal accelerators you see, which are very digitally oriented, quick scale up. We're a heavy industry. And so when we're going to be scaling up, we're going to be looking at prototypes. We're looking at, wellheads. We're looking at a very different kind of technology that we're trying to accelerate. And I think that's going to be quite exciting as we go forward. So we're looking forward to it. I think the next generation remote operations, automation, that whole thing is a very different skills base than the one we currently have in the industry. And that's sort of the ideas we want to talk about this week.
Excellent, Colette. Thank you very much. Let me first turn to Mike. So creating this next generation of technology entrepreneurs, how do you see the future?
Very briefly, I think it's right if we get some things right. Lower for longer, lower forever. So managed decline is really not something we're going to look forward to. Within that, the development of technology, the adoption of technology, and the purpose of this seminar, if you like, around entrepreneurship, are vital elements and all of that. If we get some things right, we certainly have to get a lot of things right as an ecosystem. The history of technology development in the North Sea and in the oil and gas industry, of course, is a proliferation of technology, but it's a hard road. Enough people I know in the audience know what I'm talking about. And we have to move the barriers, and we have to support the acceleration to get things moving. And it's not everybody's cup of tea out there. There's still a lot of work to do. So I would say the role of the next generation of entrepreneurs, of course, can play a vital role within that, but there's got to be support and barrier removal to realize that.
Yeah, I think so. Mike covered that ground quite well. I think next generation, we were just talking about this in terms of the energy environment that we're in today. Certainly, how we see the energy mix going forward, and the relevancy of this industry. I think it's really important that as leaders within our own organisations and leaders within the oil and gas industry, we are seen to be and helpfully developing ways of inspiring people to come into this industry and see there is a relevancy how we generate new ideas and next ideas going forward. It's going to be really, really important. And we were just talking offline here before we started about, I joined the industry in 86, 87 when it was, I think the numbers hit $4 a barrel that year. Times were tough. People were being challenged, and the industry was being challenged then. And I'm still here today, and I've had a long career, and some members of my family have had a long career in the industry. And I think that's really important to let's get that message out to the next generation that this is not a sunset industry. This is an industry that has a really, really good future. And technology can be a major part in that. And I think that technology piece is really important, but we've got to step up, as Mike says, we've got to step up and remove the barriers and be in it to win it.
Thank you very much, both of you. I'll come to you for questions in the audience in the next couple of minutes, but let me start by asking each of the panelists, perhaps, how do we go about identifying the next generation of technology entrepreneurs? Where do we find them? Come to Neil first on that.
Well, there's two of them sitting in front of me right now, so I've identified two straight away. So, as they say, I think somebody said the other day that you want to find pecans, you look under the pecan tree, right? So these guys right in front of us. So we were just talking offline about identifying, I guess, demystifying some of this as well, and making sure that we engage in a really meaningful way. We were talking about whether or not it's right to go down do a master's as well as you. My view is there is no right answer. The right answer is the one that fits you and the one that fits the individual and fits the individual company, if you like, as well.
Colette, what's your view on that?
I think it's actually really challenging to get people to be brave enough. I think that's what we're talking about. There's so many barriers to bringing forward technology. And a lot of people who look at success don't realize that the people who are millionaires today quite often mortgaged everything they had just to get to that point. So there is a risk. There is a real challenge. But it's to get people passionate about the challenge. And to some extent, I'm really on the other side that it shouldn't be oil and gas. It should be just a technical challenge. I think some of the challenges we have today are the same for the renewables. They're the same for some of the car industry. That it's trying to get people to think of what would make a difference and unlock potential. And then for us to be brave enough in the North Sea to embrace that technical sort of solution and see how we could apply it to our industry. So, I think we've got to get out there. We've got to start looking, certainly outside of our own industry, to try and find the next generation of entrepreneurs.
I think we need to think about what we mean by technology entrepreneurs. I think it's a very overused term. For me, it's about an attitude, a state of mind, in terms of looking for not just new technologies to apply, but also new ways of doing things, new contracting approaches, new cultural norms within our industry. I do a lot of work out with this industry. I'm working with a business that's heavily in the aerospace, and it blows my mind the different way the relationships are in that industrial community and how they work together. It's not always fit for purpose for us. So first thing, establish what we mean by the entrepreneur. Secondly, I think it's about creating an environment and they will come. And I don't think we should be ageist or sexist about this. We can have old entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs as well. I'm sure Neil would accord with that within the corporate structure. But if we leave everything the way it is, which is, there's some classic language out there we need to get rid of. We don't do it that way around here. Sonny, I've had that one. You want to run that down my well? No chance. So you get that sort of huge. I'm 3 years to retirement. Don't bother me with this. So we've got some blockers in our industry. And hey, I'm an independent. I can say these things. They're out there, and we need to do something about it. That's part of it. The other half of it is the support mechanisms, support that OGTC can give. This is a really important initiative backed by both governments. There's a lot of eyes on this. Support from the universities. Now, I'm chairman of Robert Gordon's University, and from 2019, we'll be running an elective in entrepreneurship for everybody. And we're toying with, by 2020, making it compulsory. Don't know about that. The other question is, can you teach entrepreneurship? Is that an oxymoron? Yeah, discuss. So that's my rather complicated answer to your question. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Anyone got questions they want to put to the panel? Okay, we'll come here first. I think your hand was up first.
Hi, so it's Callum Sinclair from Burness Paul. I think you've all touched on it, but I'm just wondering, you can accelerate the technology, but how do you accelerate the culture change? You don't wait for these guys to necessarily to come through. That's not fast enough. So how do you accelerate that culture change within the industry?
So I'll take a punt at that. I think I'm on. Because I think there are multiple ways, but I do think something like the Oil and Gas Technology Centre is absolutely a vehicle that'll help that for a number of reasons. One, it's a place that people who have an idea can come when it's so difficult to break into the oil and gas industry. That you walk in our doors and at least have somebody who listen to it and try and work out a way that you might be able to get into the market. Or even better, invest in it to help you get it to the point where it's a concept or a prototype that you can then show an industry, say that it works like this. So that's, I think, a massive help. I think the other thing that we're really starting to see is having a sort of trusted or safe haven like the Oil and Gas Technology Centre allows companies to come in looking for those ideas, and then we can validate and verify the technology before an operator takes it on. And I think that combination allows us to potentially accelerate. And then obviously TechX, the combination is not just what we see is some nice technology ideas that come through, but honestly, the companies may not be mature enough to really invest in. So there is a need for an element of business acceleration, business nous to be provided as well. And we're going to be developing that capability from December, working with Scottish Enterprise and a few others.
Neil, what's your experience in Expro Group on that point?
I don't think my mic's working. Yeah, I think it's an interesting point from a cultural point of view. It can be about technology, but it can also be about using what you've got in a different way. And I think that's really a key point too. But we've historically been slow to adopt as an industry. A bit like Mike was saying, you're not putting that in my hole. You don't want to be first to the. Nobody wants to be first. I mean, we are getting past some of that, thankfully, but there's still a lot of work to do. And culturally, my biggest thing is to make sure that we turn up and talk joined up language as an industry, and that we're in it to win it together. Because I think there's no better time than now to do that. And certainly when the chips are down, you get better. You can get better outcomes when you engage in a different way when times are difficult. I think that's a really key thing I've learned through the years, is that there's never a right time other than now.
Come to you next.
Thomas Laurent from Axos. Can I ask a long question? Am I allowed?
Yeah. We'll give you short answers, but you can ask a long question.
So I'll lay a bit of a framework, but there may be two types of technology we can think of. One is the one that removes the bottleneck. Say you make a hardware improvement on the drill bit. And the other one is a technology that has wide consequences on the operating model. And I think that's digitalization. And in that sense, you're talking about changing a lot in the operator for the operating model, but also this will impact the business model of their service providers. Mm-hmm. In this case, the incentive have to shift completely, actually, for the technology to be adopted. How does the OGTC look into this, and what value are you looking to provide in that context?
I'll start, but I'm going to toss it to be prepared. Because we've actually started talking about that, because one of the things we're seeing in the centre is that as you bring in new technologies, they absolutely impact behaviours, not only in the one that the standard of, well, I don't want to try it, but actually the way you change the way somebody works. This used to take me 5 days to do. Now I can do it in 5 hours or 5 minutes. What does that mean for my job? What does that mean? So there's a real cultural behavioural shift, but it also has a knock-on effect on the procurement model that you use. And we're seeing that as I'll call it a very real barrier. in the conversations. As you work with the supply chain, they're going, but how do I value it? Do I value it at 5 minutes, or do I value it at the 5 weeks it used to take? And the answer is somewhere in the middle. And we've sat down and talked to the OGA and the Oil and Gas UK and said, this is a challenge we have to take on at an industry level. The Oil and Gas Technology Centre on its own can't solve that problem, but we absolutely, as an industry, have to decide how we want to do that. There are some examples in aeronautical and in automotive, but it's not perfect, and they have a very different supply chain. But I think we are going to have to address that, and so it goes sort of to the supply chain task force and the efficiency task force as one of the challenges that they're going to have to help us with.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think there's no real short answer to that. What I've seen, though, is both at a broader supply chain level and within my own company, a real appetite now from MD levels of organizations to really push down through their organization and make sure that we're having a proper conversation about value rather than cost. And I think the value conversation, it could be anything. It could be a technology conversation, or it could be an innovation around a different business model. And that's a much wider and much more ingrained conversation than it has ever been. Since I've been involved in the OGTC and Oil and Gas UK, and also working with the OGA in the last 24 months, that is a much more mature conversation at a much more mature level than it's ever been. So I'm really encouraged by that. But there's a lot of work to do. And I think, as Colette says, sometimes it's really hard to articulate where the value is if you're looking at it in a traditional sense. But it's really important to break through that and try, I guess my mother always said to me, if somebody asks your opinion and they don't accept it, don't blame them for not hearing it. Have another go at trying to deliver it in a different way. And that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, I think this is a vital question, if you like. I have a strong sense of running out of time. I think the mature infrastructure is even more mature, and at what point is it irrecoverable? So joined up thinking, as been described, is vital. I mean, it's no mean task, but the operators are looking at their business models, they're rethinking their business models. There's a session on that this afternoon, I think. Service companies have to rethink their business models. SMEs need to think about their business models. And frankly, we don't have a tradition of collaboration down the, we have a tradition of intense competition. And I think that's what I've been learning from working away with aerospace, is that collaboration has created new ways of working, new ways of creating value at less cost. And the other thing we cannot do is try and take more costs out. There's a lot of supply chains are running at cost now. There's no more margins to be given. So on the positive side, I think there's nothing like facing no future to make you innovative. You know what I'm saying? And I remember some years ago when I worked in Houston, and I visited a pretty well-known CEO of a middle-ranking independent, and he had his feet up on the desk, and he said, Mr. Fleming, I hate Smartwell technology, but we're going to buy it. We're going to buy it big, because without it, none of us have got jobs. And that's kind of the wrong way into the right conversation, if you like. So, but I would not underestimate the importance of your question and the challenge in that, for sure. But there's a lot of discussion going on, and one of the unique features for me, for the OGTC, is its relationship not just with the operating community, but at the highest level. So those conversations are taking place at the highest level, and then you're back down to how do you trickle that down, how do you push that down and create the change you need. Big challenge for the operators, because if the chief executive of an operating company is surrounded by naysayers, he or she needs to do something about that for all of our sakes. Thank you.
Thank you all. Great question. Hopefully that gives you the answer. Yep. Okay. Next question here.
Oh, from Digital Energy Journal. So my theory is that the success of the industry basically depends on the awareness of all our professionals, how much they understand the world they're working in, whether they're a production engineer, drilling engineer, reservoir engineer. And I think there's a massive opportunity for digital technology to serve that. I don't see any example of that on the OGTC stand or even in the exhibition at all. There's lots of sensors, but this is something different. This is understanding what a production engineer actually needs to know or would help them and giving it to them. And there's also opportunity for millions of entrepreneurs, because every job role could have a separate company designing a software system just for them. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, so I would say you probably just maybe missed some of the things that are in the sense. So tomorrow there's a whole sort of what's they called session. There's a whole session on digitalization and that we will be addressing things like the fourth industrial revolution and the impact it has on the industry. And that's not just about sensors. That is all about how you're connected and how we can use data in a different way. We're one of the biggest data generative industries in the world. We're one of the poorest users of that. So it's not so much about, whether it's understanding an individual's what they're doing. I think the challenge we have is how we run our business and what jobs we need in the future. Because we may not, they get to a point where some of the traditional jobs we can automate, even down to some of the interpretive jobs. And we're seeing that. There was a great example today from a KPMG where, a standard sort of billing process was now just done by a robot. So I think we have to start thinking about where's the value, where's the things where we need people, how do we connect the information we've already got, where's the gaps, and how do we get industry to start sharing data across fields? Because the biggest opportunity we have to really get into the fourth industrial revolution is to stop stopping at a license block and to start connecting data across our complete basins. So I think there is a conversation around that. I certainly know in our digital scope, the two major projects we're looking at go across basin. They're looking at marine logistics. We're looking at exploration plays. So it may not be obvious on the stand, but it is a very big focus for us.
And here's the huge challenge for the reservoir. The reservoir is best understood when you plug and abandon your last well and you make your major capital investment decisions on very imperfect knowledge. So there's a huge opportunity there to change that risk profile, really, and I think that's really important. And there's a lot of discussion about it going on in this town, in this industry, and there's a lot of specialists in the ecosystem that are attracted by this. It's really, how do you get that conversion through? And I think OGTC is a real opportunity of playing an enabler in that regard.
I think it's right, Mike. Actually, just picking up on the DCOM or P&A theme, we've only scratched the surface of this so far. I think, there are that connectivity to looking back through the life cycle of a well, but we haven't scratched that itch yet. And the supply chain is really focused on bringing technologies around that piece to bear and helping understand that. And I see, if it's, a lot of people have talked rather perhaps negatively about the collaboration word, but if there's one area where you see collaboration in the supply chain and how that business model, how those business models are being adapted and are evolving, it's in the P&A decommissioning space. And there's, again, whether it's a reservoir or whether it's a topsides, there's a lot to be learned from what's going on in that space that we could maybe apply in other areas of the business model throughout the life cycle of the asset.
Thank you, Neil. Any other questions? Okay, let me pose one for Colette then. So I am a startup technology firm. What can the OGTC do for me?
Oh, thanks. So it depends on level of maturity of the technology. You may be startup, but your technology may be relatively mature. You can come into the solution center depending on which technology you're focused on. As we mature the TechX, that will be one of the areas where a true startup that genuinely needs some additional business guidance, needs some development of prototyping, all that sort of stuff, that would go through TechX, or at least apply to try and come in through the TechX program. And that's where there is a commitment financially upfront to help. There's no equity taken by us. It's purely, driving our ability to promote that technology and that company. So I think it's a unique opportunity for companies to come into a startup model where no equity is required and you are given financial assistance to get through the program.
Yeah, makes sense. Mike, from a university's point of view, an academic point of view, clearly you're involved with Robert Gordon's. Is there anything you would add to this debate in terms of how the unis are approaching the challenge?
Well, one thing I've found getting involved with Robert Gordon's and other universities is the well of expertise and knowledge there is in universities. I mean, Willie's there from Strathclyde, and I had a great time with him seeing all what goes on down there. So one thing for sure is there's a lot of expertise in universities, and the relationship between the universities and the catapults, for example, is really important to this as well. I would call to the industry to actually be much closer to the universities and understand what they have to offer: research, consulting, near market, far market. You'll find the universities, and Robert Gordon's is no exception, very receptive to shaping training programs that are required by companies. We cannot be islands, universities. You know, we need to be part of the economic infrastructure, if you like. And I think also I would add to that is that from Robert Gordon's point of view, that we've been looking pretty hard and enacting quite a lot of steps to be even closer to industry. You're going to see new types of courses that are much more industry focused. You're going to see stuff that I can't really talk about at the moment, which is best practice in other countries around the world. So the universities are stepping up, if you like, but they need to find their place as well. The universities also need to be better and sharper, quicker at their work. Turnaround times need to be better and more customer focused, I think.
Thank you. So I'm going to come to each of the panelists now, perhaps starting with Neil, just to conclude the conversation, and ask you what your one piece of advice would be for a technology entrepreneur setting out on the journey today.
Well, I think my one piece of advice would be, if you've got an idea and you've got some passion, don't give up. As I said earlier, if you get multiple no's, live life like yes is the reality.
So I would suggest that, particularly for entrepreneurs, and if it's a new business, stop thinking about what it does, because ultimately nobody else, they sort of care, but what they really want to know is why they want it. So stop telling me how it works and all that, but tell me what it does for me. And I think that's sometimes the disconnect. We get a lot of proposals in of it does A, B, and C, and you're like, yeah, but what does that mean? So for people who are very technically oriented in their technology, they don't realize that we're more interested in the impact of the technology. So think about that. Think about your end user.